You see, there's something wonderfully absurd about this whole business of trying to be spiritual. Have you noticed? The moment you decide, I'm going to become spiritual, you've already fallen for the oldest trick in the cosmic book. Because the one who wants to become spiritual is the same old rascal who wanted to be rich, to be admired, to be right, to be in control, only now he's wearing robes and a slightly holier expression. It's as if the ego, having exhausted itself with worldly ambitions, tiptoes into the temple and says, perhaps I shall conquer heaven next. And so, off we go, buying incense, crystals, sacred texts, and online courses, as if enlightenment were a subscription plan. We chant, we posture, we sit very straight, and we secretly check whether we look serene enough doing it. But the more spiritual we try to be, the more entangled we become in the game of pretending. It's no different from trying to act natural. You can't do it deliberately, you see. The very effort ruins it. For the moment you strain to be pure, humble, awakened, you are simply adding another mask to the collection. A prettier one, yes, but still a mask. And isn't that delightful? Because it means the universe is still playing with itself through you. You thought you were escaping the game, but really, you've just changed costumes. You've gone from banker to Buddha, from social climber to seeker, from chasing promotions to chasing enlightenment. But chasing is chasing, no matter what name you give it. Now, this is not to mock devotion, far from it. There is beauty in the longing to understand, to touch something beyond the noise, but the trap lies in making spirituality another project of the self, another way to improve the ego, to polish it until it shines with divine approval. You may scrub and polish the mirror all day long, but if the hand doing the scrubbing is still the ego, you only succeed in spreading the dust around. You see, the truth of awakening is not an achievement. It isn't something you earn like a medal for moral discipline. It's something that happens the moment you stop pretending to be anyone at all. When you stop standing outside yourself, trying to fix yourself, trying to catch yourself being good. Because the very one who tries to be spiritual is the phantom that disappears when you truly awaken. The game is exquisite, really. You go searching for the divine as though it were hidden behind the stars. And then when you've meditated, fasted, and philosophized yourself to exhaustion, you discover it was never apart from you. It was looking through your very eyes the whole time. The great cosmic joke, my friends, is that there's no you who can become enlightened. There is only enlightenment playing the game of being you. The same consciousness that shines in the saints, shines in the sinners, in the tired office worker, in the child laughing at nothing in particular. And when you see that not as an idea, but as a living reality, you realize that spirituality was never something to acquire. It was what you were before you began trying to be something else. So, you can put away your halo, take a deep breath, and perhaps even laugh a little. For there's nothing more spiritual than laughter at one's own seriousness. That's the beginning of real awakening, the discovery that you don't need to hold the sky up, that the game was never about winning at all. It's about realizing there was never anyone separate from the game to begin with. Now, after you've laughed at the absurdity of trying to become spiritual, you may notice something rather mischievous going on inside you. The ego, that sly actor who has played 1,000 roles, suddenly reappears on stage wearing a new costume, a long robe perhaps, or a calm smile, or a tone of gentle superiority. It bows and says, behold me, I am the humble seeker of truth. But of course, the moment it says that, humility is gone. You see, the ego is an expert impersonator. It doesn't die easily. It merely changes outfits. Yesterday, it was the businessman striving for success. Today, it's the meditator striving for enlightenment. Yesterday it said, I am better because I have more money, and today it whispers, I am better because I have no desire for money. Either way, it's still playing the same game, the game of being somebody. And isn't that fascinating? The ego will even brag about not having an ego. It will boast about its detachment. It will take pride in its humility. It will compare its stillness to your restlessness and say, "Ah, yes, I have transcended that stage." And this is why spiritual pride is far more subtle than ordinary pride, because it wears the mask of virtue. You see, when you first begin to see through the illusions of society, success, competition, the endless race, there's a great relief. But that relief itself can become another identity. You begin to feel that you are the one who knows the secret, the one who has seen through the trick. Yet the very feeling of being someone who has seen is the same trap in a higher disguise. The ego is like a cat that loves to chase its own tail. It keeps spinning in circles, pretending that this time it will finally catch enlightenment. But enlightenment is not an object. It is not something to be possessed. The seeker and the sought are the same movement. The very energy that wants to find the truth is the truth, hiding from itself through the pretense of searching. Let me put it this way. The self that wants to dissolve itself is like fire trying to burn itself up. The harder it burns, the more it remains fire. And that is the grand paradox. You cannot use the ego to destroy the ego, because the act of destruction is still its own performance. So what to do? Well, you begin by noticing the play. That's all. You watch the mind invent new spiritual goals, new ways to prove its worth, new methods to polish its image. You don't condemn it, you don't try to stop it, you simply smile. Because once you see the disguise loses its power. The actor is caught in the act. The moment you catch the ego pretending to be holy, you don't have to fight it. You can laugh. You can say, "Ah, there you are again, my old friend, trying to win the game of losing." And in that laughter, the spell begins to break. You see, the ego cannot survive being seen. It lives in pretense, in seriousness, in the effort to control the scene. But when you see through it gently, humorously, without judgment, it starts to fade like mist in the morning sun. Then something marvelous begins to happen. When you stop chasing holiness, holiness begins to shine through you naturally. When you stop trying to appear awakened, awareness awakens of its own accord, because the truth was never hiding in your performance. It was always there, underneath the mask, underneath the striving, underneath the endless self-improvement project. So the great trick is not to kill the ego, but to see it for what it is, a divine comedian, a player on the stage of life. Once you realize the play, you can enjoy it. You can let the ego dance, sing, and stumble, all without taking it too seriously. And perhaps that is what the sages meant by liberation, not the death of the self, but the freedom to stop pretending that the self was ever in charge. Now, let's imagine for a moment that you've seen through the ego's disguise as the seeker. You've caught the rascal wearing his monk's robes, and you've laughed about it. Wonderful. But then something else appears, something even more curious. You find yourself wandering through the marketplace of enlightenment. And what a marketplace it is! Stalls everywhere, each one selling a slightly different flavor of awakening. One promises instant calm for $9.99. Another swears it can raise your vibration in 7 days or less. You can even take a master class in enlightenment, taught, of course, by someone who has transcended the need to teach, but is happy to do so for a reasonable fee. Now, I don't say this with condemnation, I say it with amusement, because the marketplace is not wrong. It is part of the great play. It's the divine Leela in modern form, the sacred masquerading as marketing. Even the Buddha might have laughed to see his teachings turned into a YouTube ad. But notice what's happening beneath it all. The human longing for meaning, for peace, for something beyond the humdrum chaos of ordinary life. And that longing is beautiful. It's innocent. The problem arises when we start believing that awakening is a commodity, a product to purchase, a badge to wear, a brand to follow. You see, the moment we treat enlightenment as something to acquire, we've turned it into another possession. We've taken the infinite and shrunk it down into a personal trophy. Look at me, we say, I'm evolving. But evolution doesn't boast. Awareness doesn't announce itself. It simply is. And so the market thrives, not because truth is for sale, but because people would rather buy a method than sit in silence. Silence, after all, cannot be packaged. It cannot be advertised with smiling models and glowing testimonials. It doesn't come with a guarantee or a certificate of completion. Silence offers no badge for the ego to display. And yet, silence is the only real teacher. What's ironic, of course, is that even when people hear this, they turn that into a strategy. Ah, they say, now I shall practice silence. I'll meditate twice as hard at being effortless. And there it goes again, the doing of non-doing, the selling of unsellable stillness. But remember, there's nothing wrong with teachers, practices, or communities. They are fingers pointing to the moon. The trouble comes when we mistake the finger for the moon, when we clutch the teacher, the method, the brand, and forget to look at the vastness they were pointing toward. Because enlightenment, if we must use that word, is not a result of method, but a collapse of method. It's not what happens after you've perfected your practice. It's what remains when you realize there was never anything to perfect. The real teacher, the real temple, the real practice, all of it is happening now. The voice you're hearing, the breath you're taking, the weight of the chair beneath you, this is the Dharma, alive and moving. The sacred marketplace is just the ordinary world, wearing 1,000 costumes, selling enlightenment to itself for the fun of pretending to forget. And perhaps the most profound realization is this: even the illusion of selling truth is itself part of truth's dance. You cannot escape it, because even your foolishness belongs to it. The divine is playing all the roles, the guru and the student, the vendor and the buyer, the charlatan and the saint. When you see that, the game becomes transparent. You no longer despise the world for its absurdities. You smile, knowing that the whole spectacle, the podcasts, the retreats, the slogans, the limited time offers, are all part of consciousness, laughing at its own cleverness. And in that laughter, you drop the heavy need to find the perfect path, because every path leads here, where you already are. The marketplace dissolves into the mirror, and in that mirror, you see not sellers or seekers, only one vast awareness playing hide and seek with itself. Now, after you've wandered through that delightful marketplace of enlightenment, sampled its incense, tasted its wisdom, and perhaps bought a few of its promises, you may begin to sense something deeper, something beyond the entire business of buying and selling, gaining and losing. You may notice that all this seeking, all this talking about awakening, depends on one great illusion, the illusion that there is someone separate who can awaken. This is the heart of the whole matter, the insight that shatters the shell. There is no separate self apart from the universe. There never was. There is only this happening, this movement, this eternal unfolding. What you call you is not a spectator of life. It is life itself, looking at itself through human eyes. You see, from the very beginning, we were taught to believe in a division. I am here, the world is out there, I am the observer, everything else is observed. But what happens if that division was never real? What happens if the seer and the seen are two ends of the same rainbow? When a bird sings outside your window, is the sound really out there, or is it already in you the moment you hear it? When you feel the wind on your face, Who exactly is doing the feeling? The face and the wind meet, and in that meeting, there is no boundary. There is only experience, seamless, immediate, whole. And this is what non-duality means, not some lofty philosophy, not a clever paradox to impress your friends, but the simple recognition that reality is one continuous gesture. You are not a fragment, you are the entire movement, momentarily shaped as a person. The wave is not separate from the ocean is waving as you. But our minds, bless them, are terribly fond of categories. They love to cut the seamless cloth into pieces, good and bad, sacred and profane, self and other, spiritual and worldly. We spend our lives stitching those pieces back together, never realizing the cloth was never torn. The division exists only in thought. The universe itself is perfectly undivided, perfectly whole, and has never been otherwise. The great sages saw this not as an idea, but as a living experience. They looked within and found no inside. They looked without and found no outside. They discovered that the observer and the observed, the thinker and the thought, the doer and the deed are all the same process, seen from different points of view. The dance and the dancer are not two. The seeing and the seen arise together like two sides of one coin. So, when you meditate, when you sit quietly and the mind begins to chatter, don't imagine there's a separate you who must silence it. The chatter itself is part of the silence. The thought and the thinker are the same vibration. You can't grasp stillness by opposing movement, for stillness and movement define each other. To resist noise is to make more noise. But to see that the noise is the silence dancing that is freedom. And here's the delicious irony. Once you see that there was never a division, you no longer need to reconcile anything. Life becomes miraculously ordinary. You eat, you sleep, you laugh, you weep, all as the universe playing itself out. You don't need to maintain a spiritual persona or hold yourself to some impossible ideal, because the wind doesn't try to blow correctly, and the river doesn't strain to flow in the right direction. They simply are, and that is perfection itself. When you taste this, even for a moment, something inside relaxes forever. The need to be spiritual fades. The fear of being unspiritual fades. You begin to live like water, flowing through every shape but belonging to none. And in that flow, the ancient illusion dissolves, the illusion of me and mine, of this and that, of seeker and sought. You find that what you were looking for was the one who was looking, and that the one who was looking was never separate from what was seen. That, my friends, is the original insight, the recognition that all the saints, sinners, sages, and fools are but different masks worn by the same infinite face. And once you see this, you can finally laugh, not as the enlightened person, not as the spiritual hero, but as the universe itself enjoying the cosmic joke of pretending to be you. You see, once you've seen through the illusion of separation, once you've glimpsed that there is no spiritual world apart from the so-called ordinary one, something very curious begins to happen. Life, just as it is, begins to shimmer. The simplest things, a kettle boiling, a bird perched on a fence, the feeling of socks against your feet, suddenly reveal themselves as sacred, not because you've added anything special to them, but because you've finally stopped insisting that they should be different. We were taught, to imagine that the divine lives somewhere far away, up there, out there, in temples or texts, in someone wiser or holier than ourselves. But that's the greatest hiding place of all. For where could the divine hide except in plain sight, in the very act of breathing, in the small gestures you perform without thought, stirring tea, turning a doorknob, glancing at the sky? When you understand this, the world no longer divides itself into spiritual and mundane. Washing the dishes is the same as reciting a prayer. Driving to work is no less sacred than meditating under a tree. In fact, you may find that enlightenment tastes exactly like dish soap and traffic lights. And isn't that funny? The mind always expected enlightenment to come with trumpets and halos. But instead, it comes disguised as Tuesday morning. You wake up, you stretch, you pour coffee, and that's it. That's the miracle. But of course, the ego finds this deeply disappointing. It wanted something spectacular, something to boast about, a spiritual certificate to hang on the wall. It wanted visions, ecstasies, fireworks. Yet, the truth is too plain for the ego to notice. Reality itself is the miracle. The very fact that anything exists at all, that sound vibrates, that light moves, that you can feel warmth on your skin, is infinitely mysterious. You don't need to escape to monasteries or mountaintops to find holiness. Holiness is wherever you happen to be when you stop arguing with the moment. It's in your breath right now. It's in the hum of the refrigerator. It's in the heartbeat you didn't ask for, pulsing away quietly while you chase grand ideas about God. When you see this, gratitude becomes effortless. Not the gratitude of polite words, thank you, but the gratitude of awe, the kind that makes you laugh and weep at once because it's too beautiful, too simple, too obvious to describe. You realize you've been walking through paradise the whole time, complaining that it wasn't spiritual enough. This is why the old Zen masters said things like, when hungry eat, when tired sleep. Because the ordinary act, done in full awareness, is awakening. Every sound, every motion, every glance contains the whole of existence. You can't get closer to God than you already are. The world doesn't need to change. It only needs to be seen. And the seeing happens when you stop trying so hard to see. You simply notice without commentary, without analysis, that this right here is it. This moment, with its imperfections, its interruptions, its dishes in the sink and dust on the floor, is the living body of the sacred. And what a relief that is, because it means you don't have to maintain a holy image anymore. You don't have to talk a certain way, or dress a certain way, or pretend that you never feel irritated or lost. The divinity doesn't disappear when you get frustrated. It's present as the frustration. The sacred isn't hiding behind your emotions, it is your emotions. Joy, sorrow, boredom, delight, all waves of the same ocean, all reflections of the same infinite light. So you see, the real temple was never made of stone. It was made of awareness. And the altar is not somewhere outside of you, it's this living, breathing, ever-changing moment. When you bow to that, not with your head but with your heart, you discover that every act is worship, every breath is prayer, and every laugh is meditation. Life itself becomes your guru, and the teaching is always the same. Stop waiting for something more. Now, when we begin to sense that the ordinary is already sacred, a very human temptation appears. We say to ourselves, I see. All I have to do is be present. All I have to do is surrender. All I have to do is stop trying. And then, without realizing it, we start trying not to try. You see the problem? The moment you decide to be effortless, you've turned it into an effort. You've made letting go into something you must achieve. It's like telling yourself, I must relax right now, and clenching your fists in determination to do so. It's the same paradox everywhere you turn, the mind trying to catch its own tail. Meditation, prayer, discipline, all of them are wonderful when they arise naturally. But they can become traps when the motive behind them is to reach something. Because the moment there is a goal, there is a gap between you and what you seek. And that gap is illusion itself. The very striving to awaken is the sleep you are trying to escape. We moderns are especially good at this. We've turned even inner peace into a competition. I meditate for 45 minutes a day, we say, as if clocking enlightenment hours. We measure our mindfulness like steps on a fitness tracker. We evaluate our progress, and yet every attempt to measure awareness turns it into an object, something the self possesses. But awareness cannot be possessed. It is what you are before you started counting. You cannot control the process of awakening any more than you can control digestion. You can eat properly, yes, but the body does the rest. Likewise, you can sit quietly, breathe gently, but the deeper transformation happens by itself. Awareness unfolds when the meddling self takes a nap. You see, all techniques are like rafts meant to cross a river. They are useful until you reach the other side. But once you've crossed, it would be quite silly to hoist the raft on your back and carry it up the mountain, insisting, "This is my precious method." The point of the raft is to leave it behind. The danger is not in the technique itself, but in identifying with the one who practices. The meditator, the yogi, the spiritual achiever, these are just new costumes for the same actor. And this actor, however sincere, still believes he's the doer, the controller, the one who must make reality conform to his ideals. But awakening is precisely the recognition that there was never such a controller at all. Think of it like breathing. You can take a deep breath right now, but you don't have to remember to breathe. It happens. Life breathes you. In the same way, meditation happens when you stop meditating on purpose. Presence appears when you stop trying to be present. Stillness is there the moment you cease chasing it. It's terribly simple. And that's why it's so difficult. Because the ego is always looking for a lever to pull, a way to make things happen. It cannot imagine that something so vast, so mysterious, could unfold without its involvement. Yet, as long as you believe you are the doer, the dancer cannot feel the music because you're too busy trying to conduct the orchestra. So, instead of struggling to be silent, just listen. Instead of struggling to let go, notice what's holding on. Don't condemn it, see it, smile at it, and the grip will soften on its own. The river doesn't strain to flow downstream. Gravity takes care of that. And so, the secret of every true practice is not discipline in the sense of control, but discipline in the sense of trust, the willingness to allow, to let life meditate you, let awareness awaken itself through your stillness. When you stop turning awakening into a task, awakening becomes as natural as laughter, as breathing, as sleep. It's not something you do. It's what happens when the doer falls silent. And then, paradoxically, everything you do becomes effortless. Action flows without calculation. Compassion arises without effort. And life unfolds without anyone needing to supervise it. This is the great joke of all spiritual techniques. They exist to show you that you never needed them. When the fire of seeking burns itself out, what remains is the quiet warmth of being, no method, no goal, no controller, no controlled. Just life, moving beautifully, by itself. At a certain point, after all the striving, all the methods, all the exhausting attempts to be spiritual, something inside you simply stops. Not because you've finally succeeded, but because you've finally seen the futility of trying. It's as though life itself sighs and says, "Enough now, you can rest." That moment, that quiet recognition, is the beginning of real liberation. Not the liberation of achieving freedom, but the liberation of realizing you were never bound. You've been holding the rope with both hands, tugging against life, only to discover it wasn't tied to anything at all. Letting go, you see, is not something you do. It's what happens when you see clearly that there's nothing left to hold. The hand opens by itself. The current carries you whether you struggle or float. And the funny thing is, it carries you better when you stop fighting. We live under this peculiar delusion that control equals safety. That if only we think enough, plan enough, discipline enough, we can keep chaos at bay. But life, in its infinite playfulness, refuses to be controlled. It blows through our plans like wind through leaves. And the more tightly we grip, the more we feel the turbulence. Freedom doesn't come from tightening the reins, it comes from dropping them. You don't find peace by rearranging the world, but by trusting it. The wave doesn't need to push the ocean to reach the shore, it gets there naturally. This, you see, is the essence of surrender. Not resignation, not the heavy sigh of defeat, but the lightness of understanding. The surrender of the leaf that falls, because it trusts the air to catch it. You begin to realize that every attempt to cling to people, to ideas, to identity, is a kind of fear. Fear that without the story, you'll vanish. But when you dare to loosen your grip, something astonishing happens. You don't fall into nothingness, you fall into everything. The very ground you were afraid to let go of was the air that holds you now. And here's the marvelous paradox. The moment you truly let go, life begins to flow through you with ease. Decisions make themselves. Events unfold with a grace that no amount of control could ever produce. The mind, once frantic to steer the ship, discovers that the ocean knows the way home far better than the sailor. This is what the mystics have always meant by trust. Not belief in a doctrine, but a living trust in the process of existence. A willingness to dance without needing to know the choreography, to be the music rather than the dancer. Of course, the ego protests. It says, but if I don't take control, who will? And the answer is wonderfully simple: no one. Because there is no someone outside the dance. The music plays itself, the stars spin by their own rhythm, the heart beats, the lungs breathe, the planets move without an overseer. So why should you be any different? When you let go of control, you don't become irresponsible. You become responsive. You stop forcing, and you start flowing. You stop trying to make life behave, and you begin to cooperate with its rhythm. And that rhythm, when you listen closely, is love, the pulse of creation itself. Love is what letting go feels like. It is not grasping, not demanding, not holding the world hostage to your expectations. It is allowing things and people and moments to be as they are, and discovering that they were never against you to begin with. So letting go, in the truest sense, is not a loss but a homecoming. It's the end of resistance and the beginning of wonder. You find that the weight you've carried was made entirely of your own effort. Drop it, and suddenly the world feels lighter, not because it changed, but because you stopped trying to carry it. And when that happens, when you finally trust the flow, you laugh. You laugh not because life is easy, but because it's too vast, too beautiful, too endlessly self-moving to ever need your interference. You laugh as the universe laughs through you, delighted to have remembered once again that there was never anything to hold on to. And when you've truly let go, when the tight fist of control finally opens, something quite marvelous happens. You start to laugh. Not the laughter of ridicule, but the laughter of recognition. The laughter of the gods, who know that the whole drama of striving and seeking, of being lost and found, of birth and death, was a game all along. It's as if the universe itself winks at you and says, "Ah, you finally remembered. It was all me, playing hide and seek with myself." You see, the cosmic joke isn't cruel. It's beautifully kind. The joke is that there was never anything to fix, nothing to attain, no path to walk, no one to walk it. All your struggles, your achievements, your grand spiritual adventures were the universe playing dress-up, pretending to forget itself, so it could enjoy the joy of remembering. That's why, when awakening comes, it doesn't thunder through the heavens. It chuckles softly in your heart, because you realize you were never apart from anything. The seeker was the sought, the problem was the solution, the question was the answer, and all along, the one asking was the very thing it was looking for. You've been chasing your own tail through lifetimes of thought, and the tail, being yours, was never out of reach. What a magnificent prank! What divine comedy! The universe, the self, the whole show, looping and folding, laughing at itself for taking its masks so seriously. And when that laughter bubbles up, something loosens forever. You stop demanding explanations from life. You stop asking, why am I here? What's my purpose? Because you see, the play is the purpose. The meaning of life is to dance, to sing, to build sandcastles, and to watch them wash away. The gods, those bright symbols of consciousness, they aren't solemn beings sitting on thrones. They are giggling through the flowers, whispering through the wind, hiding behind your very eyes. They never forgot the joke, you see. Only we humans, so eager to prove our seriousness, managed to turn the divine play into a chore. We forgot that laughter is closer to truth than logic ever was. You may notice this laughter doesn't belong to you. It arises on its own, from somewhere far deeper than the personality. It's the laughter of freedom itself, the joy that knows there's no one left to defend, no image left to maintain. It's the laughter of the wave, realizing it never left the ocean, and once you've tasted that laughter, even sorrow changes flavor. You can cry and still feel the laughter beneath it, like a soft hum, the recognition that even tragedy is part of the divine comedy. Because how could the universe explore love, compassion, courage, or forgiveness without writing both tears and laughter into its script? So yes, you may still feel pain, still feel loss, but you no longer mistake them for mistakes. You see them as movements of a great symphony that cannot go wrong. You no longer need to control the melody, you just sway with it. And in that swaying, you become the music itself. The laughter and the tears, the stillness and the storm, they are all the same song, the same joke, echoing across eternity. You never left home. The gods have always been laughing, and now you laugh with them, not above life, but through it. The laughter that doesn't deny suffering, but embraces it, that's the laughter of awakening. It says, so that's how the game goes. And dances on, free, light, and utterly at peace. After the laughter subsides, when the great cosmic joke has had its say, what remains is love. Not the sentimental sort, not the trading of affection for approval, but love as the quiet radiance of understanding. When you see that there was never a separation, that every other is simply you in disguise, love happens all by itself. You don't decide to love. You can't help it. It's the kind of love that doesn't need to be named, the kind that looks at a stranger and sees no stranger at all, the kind that listens to the cry of a bird, the sigh of the wind, the trembling of a child, and feels it as your own heartbeat. Because it is. You see, awareness, when unobstructed by fear or judgment, naturally expresses itself as kindness. It's not something you practice. It's what shines through once you stop defending yourself. All that effort to be good, to be virtuous, to be compassionate, that was just the mind rehearsing what the heart already knows by nature. When you are no longer pretending to be someone, you don't have to try to love. Love becomes the atmosphere you breathe. It doesn't choose who deserves it. It falls everywhere, like sunlight, even on the weeds, even on the stones, even on the parts of yourself you once tried to hide. And you begin to notice that the smallest gestures, a smile to a tired cashier, a moment of patience with someone angry, a quiet forgiveness for an old wound, are not moral duties. They're expressions of clarity. You're not being kind because you should. You're being kind because there's no one left to protect from love. This love is not fragile. It does not depend on being treated well. It can weep without collapsing, and it can say no without closing the heart. It isn't about always feeling nice. It's about being real. Even anger, when seen clearly, is a form of love defending what is sacred. Even grief is love's echo, resonating where something beautiful once stood. And this love doesn't stop at people. It spills into everything. The way you touch your food, the way you breathe, the way you walk across the floor. You see, when you realize the floor is also yourself, you tread softly. When you realize the tree is your lungs turned inside out, you bow without meaning to. The world becomes a mirror of tenderness. This is the kind of love that does not ask, "What do I get in return?" It simply gives, because giving and receiving are no longer opposites. When you breathe out, the trees breathe in. When the trees breathe out, you breathe in. Who's giving? Who's taking? It's all the same movement. That's why the awakened ones, the truly awake, are not aloof or detached. They're profoundly intimate with everything. They can love the moment without needing it to last. They can hold the world gently, knowing it will pass away, because they see that its passing is also its perfection. And perhaps that's what compassion really means, not pity, not fixing, but seeing so deeply that you can't help but care. You care because you understand because you've seen yourself everywhere, and that recognition, that soft, unstoppable recognition, is love. So when you hear that enlightenment leads to detachment, don't imagine a frozen heart. The detachment is from illusion, not from intimacy. You detach from control, but you fall into connection. You stop clutching the world, and in doing so, you finally hold it, gently, completely. And so, love becomes the fragrance of awakening, invisible, effortless, everywhere. It asks for nothing, it excludes nothing, it forgives everything. And when it moves through you, you realize this: to love the world is not an act of will. It is simply to stop pretending that you are not the world. Once love begins to move through you, like breath, effortless, unclaimed, a new way of living reveals itself. You find yourself without a plan, yet everything unfolds perfectly. You live without a script, and what a relief that is. For so long, you've been reciting lines written by others, parents, teachers, society, even the spiritual marketplace. Everyone told you who you were supposed to be: responsible, successful, enlightened, productive, awakened. And so you rehearsed these roles, night after night, bowing to invisible audiences, terrified of forgetting your next line. But one day, you simply forget, and the play continues anyway. The sun rises, birds sing, your heart beats. The universe didn't need your rehearsal. It never did. You see, to live without a script doesn't mean to live without intelligence. It means to live immediately. You act, but not from memory. You speak, but not from ideology. You move, but without the heavy effort of self-consciousness. You've stopped editing reality before it happens. When you live this way, your actions become like jazz improvised, alive, unpredictable, yet strangely harmonious. You don't need sheet music when you are the music. You discover that the melody of life was never written down. It's being composed, moment by moment, through you, through everything. And this spontaneity isn't careless. It's the highest kind of care, the kind that trusts the dance itself. Think of a surfer riding a wave. The surfer doesn't control the ocean. He feels its rhythm, its force, and moves with it. That's what it means to live without a script, not to dominate life, but to respond to it in perfect balance. You begin to realize that uncertainty is not chaos, it's freedom. The script, after all, was only there to protect you from not knowing. But not knowing is the very doorway to wonder. When you stop trying to predict every moment, you finally meet each one fresh as it is, not as it's supposed to be. Of course, society finds this unsettling. It likes people with plans, predictable characters who play their parts on cue. So it may look at you and say, "You've changed. You seem unfocused, irresponsible, but you haven't become careless, you've become carefree." The difference is vast. Careless means indifferent. Carefree means intimately involved, but not confined. You still show up, you still love, you still create, but now you do so with the lightness of play, not the tension of performance. You no longer move through life as a worker fulfilling a quota of experiences. You move as the wind moves, with direction, yes, but no destination. And in that freedom, you discover a kind of grace you could never plan. The right people appear at the right time. The right words come out of your mouth without rehearsal. The right path unfolds under your feet the moment you stop demanding to see the map. When you live without a script, you also lose the constant anxiety of getting it right, because there is no right. There is only this, the eternal improvisation of the present. And what a glorious performance it is. Every mistake, every hesitation, every laugh, every tear, all part of the music. You see, the script was never written by some higher power waiting to judge your performance. It was written by fear, fear of disappearing, fear of being forgotten, fear of not mattering. But now you know that the one who was afraid was just a character in the play. The real you, the awareness watching it all, was never at risk. So, live without the lines. Forget the plot. Let the dialogue surprise you. When you stop playing the role, you become the play itself. You become life, unguarded, spontaneous, whole. And that, you see, is what freedom looks like. Not escape, but effortless participation. Not control, but harmony. You no longer need to make life happen. You let life happen through you. And in that letting, you discover what you were trying to become all along. Not a spiritual success story, but a living expression of this infinite, unrepeatable moment. And then, one day, without fanfare or fireworks, the seeker dies, not dramatically, not with ceremony. There's no spiritual funeral, no announcement to the heavens. The seeker simply fades away like a character at the end of a dream who realizes he was never separate from the dreamer. You see, the seeker has been with you all along, diligent, restless, devoted. It wanted to find peace, to discover God, to reach the summit of enlightenment. It built altars, read scriptures, compared teachers, and measured progress. But all of that effort was built on a quiet assumption that something was missing, that you were missing something. And then when the game has been played to its limit, you see the truth. The one who sought was the very illusion you were seeking to escape. The seeker was never real. It was a ripple of thought pretending to be the ocean, a mask mistaking itself for the face. It dawns on you that the self who was striving for liberation was the same self that created bondage. Like a dog chasing its own tail, you'd been spinning for lifetimes, believing that if you ran just a little faster, you'd catch happiness. But happiness was the running itself, and there was never a dog to begin with. The moment this is seen, truly seen, everything stops. Not because you forced it to stop, but because there's no one left to keep spinning the wheel. The great search engine of your life, endlessly asking, "How do I awaken?" simply goes quiet. And what takes its place is silence alive. Full, immeasurable silence. The kind of silence that isn't the absence of sound, but the presence of everything. The trees sway, the birds sing, the world hums, and yet, in the midst of all this movement, there's perfect stillness. You are no longer standing outside life, trying to reach it. You are the reaching and the reached. You are the breath, not the breather, the river, not the swimmer. And curiously, When the seeker dies, nothing is lost. You still eat breakfast. You still tie your shoes. You still forget where you put your keys. But there's a subtle difference. The center is gone. The sense of I am doing this evaporates. Things simply happen. Thoughts think themselves. Actions arise of their own accord. Laughter bursts like sunlight through clouds. It's as if the universe has finally exhaled through you and said, "Ah, yes, that's better." Now, don't imagine this as some frozen state of bliss, where you float above the world like a cloud of incense. No, it's far more ordinary and far more miraculous. The seeker's death doesn't make you otherworldly. It makes you fully here, fully human. You cry when grief comes, you laugh when joy comes, you stumble, you learn, you love, but through it all, there's no one holding on to the story. The story continues, but the storyteller is gone. The pen writes without a hand. The song sings itself. This, my friends, is the gentle ending of the quest and the beginning of life as it truly is. You realize that you were never on a journey to reach something beyond yourself. You were on a journey to see that there was never anywhere else to go. And so the seeker, with all its noble ambition, bows and dissolves into the ocean of awareness. And what remains is laughter, yes, but also peace, deep, quiet, unshakable peace. Not because you've solved the mystery, but because you've realized you are the mystery. No one ever attained enlightenment. Enlightenment simply stopped pretending to be someone. The seeker dies, and life begins again, fresh, innocent, unscripted. Just this breath, just this heartbeat, just this moment. And you smile, perhaps, because you see the great cosmic humor of it all. The one who was chasing God was God all along, running in circles for the sheer delight of the dance. And when the seeker has vanished into stillness, when there is no longer any you trying to reach some distant state, what's left is the world shining, dancing, breathing, exactly as it has always been. But now, you see it. Now, you know what it truly is, a play. The sages of India called it Lila, the divine play. Not the grim march of destiny, not the moral test of a stern creator, but a cosmic theater where the one reality hides and reveals itself for the joy of the game. Everything you see, every person you meet, every triumph and every heartbreak, every birth and every death, are scenes in this endless drama of being. You are the actor, the audience, the playwright, and the stage. The masks of tragedy and comedy belong to you. The laughter and the tears are yours. And when you see this, all the old heaviness melts away. You no longer ask life to be fair. You no longer demand permanence from what is inherently fleeting. You understand that change is the rhythm of the dance, that beginnings and endings are the same movement seen from different sides. The play has always been perfect, even when the characters forget their lines. Because perfection, you see, was never about control or completion. It was about participation. The play exists to be played, not to be finished. So you live differently now. You still feel joy, but it doesn't cling. You still feel pain, but it doesn't poison. You can fall in love without fear of loss, because you know that what you love was never separate from what you are. You can face death without dread, because you've already seen through the illusion of birth. The one who began the story is the same one who ends it, and that one was never born and can never die. This is why the awakened ones laugh so easily. They see the drama without being trapped by it. They bow to the stage, to the script, to the costumes, knowing that it's all sacred theater. They can weep sincerely and still know that the tears are part of the music. So, play your role beautifully. Sing your song. Tell your story. Love your people. Build your dreams. But don't forget that you are the dreamer. 2. Don't mistake the costume for the actor. You can dive fully into life because you no longer fear being swallowed by it, you are it. And one day, when the curtain falls, you'll bow to the audience, which is also yourself, and you'll step off the stage laughing. Because you'll know that the play goes on forever, and you'll be back wearing a new mask, singing a new song. For this, my friends, is the great secret of the universe. It is not a problem to be solved, but a celebration to be enjoyed. Life is not a task, it's a dance, and you were never meant to win it, only to play it beautifully. So play, laugh, cry, be bewildered, be ordinary, be divine. The game cannot be lost, for the one who plays it is eternity itself. And in the end, when the laughter fades into silence, you'll see that there was never a beginning and never an ending, only this timeless moment, unfolding forever as you.